Well, tell me about this. You're also a published author. Is this your most recent book?
I've written 2 or 3 Celtic books in my time. Some are compilations of my blogs that I put on my website. Many years ago, I used to write for one of the Celtic accounts, but I decided I'll just do it more because I didn't want the pressure of having a weekly deadline sort of thing. But as I've written over the years, I've more and more wanted to write longer pieces, and you can't really, put 20, 30,000 words onto a blog space. Fans want something they can read in 10 minutes. I decided I would write a book about an Irish family being evicted from their homes in Donegal and ended up in Glasgow around about the time of Celtic's formation, and just bring together some of those threads about community, about church, about football even, but also about the hard lives, the poverty, and the struggles that initial generation had to establish themselves in Glasgow. It's well researched, much as it's a work of fiction. Most of the characters in it, obviously guys like Michael Davitt appear, who's clearly not a fictional character, and Matron Strong at the Royal Infirmary Hospital here in Glasgow. So there are non-fictional aspects to it, and a lot of the incidents I describe in it actually happened, like the mass expulsion of the Irish from Dunfermline in the 19th century, for instance. Not much known about. So the O'Sullivan family have come from Donegal to Glasgow, and they have to make some hard choices about how to survive, and obviously crime is one way to feed your family, but the struggles that particularly the oldest boy in the family has. But I think it's a vehicle for exploring life then and the social conditions then that people had to endure. And just to remind people that most of us are only 2 or 3 or 4 generations away from real poverty and real struggle that our forebears had. And I think it's a good story as well as a vehicle for exploring the social conditions in late 19th century Glasgow.
In the city of Glasgow, as the evening shadows fall, there are people dreaming of the hills of Donegal, you might say.
Good old Christy Moore number, that one.
Yeah. So this is available on Amazon, is it?
It's available on Amazon, yeah. And it's, as I say, it must be best part of 400 pages. It's a long book, but I think it's worth it. And I think it's a good story as well, because it's kind of the roots of things as well, And I do take the time to research things properly, There's one episode where the action's taking place in and around the 1892 Scottish Cup final between Celtic and Queen's Park when Celtic won the cup for the first time. So Celtic do get drawn into it, but how could Celtic not? Because that early Irish community in Glasgow in those days, in the 1880s, 1890s, Celtic were a big part of that and giving that community pride and giving them a reason to get up in them on. Their lives were hard, We're talking an era where the working week was 60 hours a week for a lot of people, for those that could find employment, and it was hard, dangerous work for many of them. So I think football, and the greatest thing that ever happened to association football in these islands was the invention of the weekend, or at least a half day on a Saturday, when people were suddenly freed up. So the crowds, from the days of the weekend being invented, if you like, the crowds were doubling and tripling, and football was really becoming the working man's passion, working man's theatre, because it was relatively affordable. And of course, football teams in Scotland, they came from those communities, and therefore they had real strong identification with the communities. So you had, obviously Dundee Heart, who morphed eventually into Dundee United, Hibernians, obviously in Edinburgh, and Celtic. They were, if you like, where the Irish went for recreation, and it was important to people like Brother Walford that they had athletic, and it wasn't just football. Celtic initially were a football and athletic club. The importance of keeping our young people fit and off the streets, and yes, away from the proselytizers who would try and take them away from their faith, as it were. So they had. The clubs had many reasons for coming into being, not obviously Celtic's case, feeding the poor children's dinner tables, which in a sense, and this is talked about in the book as well, led to children staying on at school when compulsory education came into place in Scotland in 1872. Most children left at the end of primary school and went to work because they just simply couldn't afford to be staying at school when their folks wanted them to earn even a pittance was enough to help out, So I think those early teaching orders, the Maris and the Notre Dame Sisters, people like that, they recognised that education was the engine of social mobility that was going to help drag the Irish out of the ghetto, basically.
Very good. Can you answer Pete McGee's question there about the...
Yes, what was his question?
It's on the screen there. Is that the suspension bridge by the Calton?
It is. I took that picture myself with my iPad, yes. Being an amateur writer, I don't have proofreaders or editors and things. I do it all myself, and it is indeed. That bridge features in a key part of the story as well. And the name, The Bridges of Glasgow, for the book, there's a scene in the book where one of the characters, who is head of the Glasgow Ribbon Men, the Ribbon Society, were agrarian societies in Ireland and historically who protected the Irish Catholic community from Orangism and landlords and things. They were like a secret society. They came to Glasgow. They came to America as well in the time, and eventually they morphed into the Fenian movement and things. But in one of the scenes, there's a huge battle taking place in Glasgow Green, and the balance could be tipped one way or another, depending if the Ribbon Men come across that bridge and aid the Irish community who are trying to protect their community. But later on, the character, Conman, who's the leader of the Ribbon Men, he's standing in the Gorbals looking across at the Clyde, at the bridges that go over into the centre of Glasgow. And he said to the other main character, Fergal O'Sullivan, he said, "Look at those bridges," he said. "The other side of those bridges is the commercial, the business, the political heart of Glasgow. Our people won't cross those bridges. Those bridges might as well be fortifications, because our people won't get to work in those banks and those insurance offices, won't get to be in the city chambers." He was talking about the bridges almost as a metaphor for the gap which the Irish had to cross over in order to take a full part in Scottish society. And as people at Phil McGillivray have pointed out, the Irish in America, for instance, reached occupational parity with the average American in 1901. In Scotland, it was 1981. So when you consider things like that, it shows you that the survey and the sort of 10-yearly big survey they do suggested that in Scotland, 12% of the population live in areas of deprivation, and 23% of Scotland's Catholics live in areas of deprivation. So that still lingers a little bit into this modern generation. And I'm not suggesting for a moment all the migrants who came here from Ireland Catholics, because a quarter of them weren't. And they brought with them their cultures and their traditions, which we can see in our streets every July, and some of the songs you might hear at football matches. So it's just interesting to look at where we've been historically and where we're going.